My dad never came back. He told me to give you this, the boy said. The Hells Angel went silent. The sun was dropping behind the hills, painting the sky in orange and purple, when Marcus Cole pulled down the metal gate of his garage. It rattled shut with a heavy clang, the sound bouncing off the empty street. Another day done. His hands were still stained black with grease, the smell of oil and metal clinging to his skin like it always did. 45 years old, and he still loved that smell. It meant work. It meant something got fixed. The parking lot was quiet now. The last customer, an old woman with a busted alternator, had driven off 20 minutes ago, waving out her window and calling him a lifesaver. Marcus had just grunted and waved back. He wasn't much for words. Never had been. He locked the padlock through the gate's chain and gave it a tug to make sure it held. His motorcycle sat nearby, chrome catching the last bit of light. He was reaching for his keys when something made him stop. A small shape stood at the edge of the parking lot, half hidden by the shadow of the streetlight pole. Marcus squinted. At first he thought it might be a stray dog, or maybe a trick of the fading light. But then the shape moved, just a little, shifting its weight from one foot to the other, and Marcus realized it was a boy. A kid. Couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. The boy didn't come closer. He just stood there, small and still, like he was trying to decide if running away was still an option. His clothes looked a size too big, like hand-me-downs, and his sneakers were scuffed at the toes. In his arms he clutched something tight against his chest. A tin box, old and rusted at the corners. And in his other hand, gripped so hard his knuckles had gone pale, was a folded piece of paper. Marcus felt something prickle at the back of his neck. Years on his bike, years in the club, years before that in the army had taught him to notice things. And what he noticed now was fear. This kid was scared. Scared. But standing his ground anyway. "You lost, kid?" Marcus called out, his voice rougher than he meant it to be. He tried to soften it, but gruff was the only setting he had. The boy didn't answer right away. His eyes, wide and dark, stayed locked on Marcus like he was sizing him up, the way you'd size up a mountain you had to climb. Marcus stood there in his leather vest, arms covered in faded tattoos, beard streaked with gray. He knew what he looked like to people. Big. Rough. The kind of man mothers pulled their kids away from on the sidewalk. But this boy didn't pull away. He took one small step forward instead. "Hey," Marcus said again, gentler this time. He crouched down just a little, trying to make himself less of a mountain. "You need help finding your mom or dad?" The boy's chin trembled. He looked down at the note in his hand like it weighed 100 pounds. Then he looked back up at Marcus, and something in his small face hardened, like he was gathering up every bit of courage a 10-year-old could hold. He walked closer, his sneakers scraping softly against the pavement. When he was close enough, he held out the folded note with both hands, the tin box tucked under his arm. Marcus took it slowly. His big, grease-stained fingers looked enormous next to the boy's small ones. He turned it over. And that was when he saw it. Written on the outside, in shaky, uneven handwriting he hadn't seen in 8 long years, was a single word. Bear. Marcus's whole body went still. Nobody had called him that in almost a decade. Nobody alive, anyway. The boy took a breath, like he'd been practicing these words the whole walk over and over, so he wouldn't forget them. "My dad never came back," the boy said, his voice small but steady. "He told me to give you this." Marcus stared at the boy. He stared at the note in his hand. The parking lot around them seemed to go silent, the whole world narrowing down to that single word written in handwriting he thought he'd never see again. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. Marcus knelt down slowly, his knees cracking with the effort, until he was eye level with the boy. Up close, he could see the kid's eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying earlier and had made himself stop. His small chin still trembled, but he held it steady, the way a kid does when someone taught him that crying doesn't fix anything. "What's your name, son?" Marcus asked. His voice came out low and careful, like he was talking to a spooked animal. "Tommy," the boy said. "Tommy Reyes." The name hit Marcus like a fist to the chest. Reyes. He kept his face still, though. Kids could read fear and panic on a grown man's face faster than anything. "Tommy," Marcus repeated, testing the name out loud, buying himself a second to breathe. "Who's your dad, Tommy?" The boy's lip quivered again. "Danny. Danny Reyes." There it was. The name Marcus hadn't let himself say in 8 years. The name that used to mean something good, something solid, back when the world made more sense. Back before everything went sideways. "Okay," Marcus said softly, nodding like that made sense, like his whole world hadn't just tilted sideways. "Okay, Tommy." His hands were not steady anymore. He noticed it himself, almost like watching someone else's hands, the way they shook just slightly as he looked down at the folded note still gripped between his fingers. The streetlight above them flickered on, buzzing to life in the dusk, throwing a pale yellow glow over the both of them. Moths were already circling it, drawn in like they always were. Marcus unfolded the note carefully, like it might fall apart in his hands if he wasn't gentle enough. The paper was soft, worn at the creases, like it had been folded and unfolded many times before it ever reached him. Whoever wrote this had touched it again and again, maybe trying to decide if they should really send it. The handwriting inside was shaky. Not neat and steady like Marcus remembered from the old days, back when Danny used to scrawl out fast notes on missions, quick and sharp, full of jokes even when things were bad. This handwriting looked like it belonged to someone tired, someone who had to fight just to hold a pen steady. "Bear. If you're reading this, it means I ran out of time. I should have called you years ago. I should have explained everything. I was a coward, and I let too much silence sit between us. I'm sorry for that. You didn't deserve it. This is Tommy. My son. He's a good kid, better than I deserve. I need you to look after him and his mom, Sarah. They don't have anyone else. I know it's a lot to ask after everything, after all this time. But you're the only one I trust with this, Bear. You always were. There's more I need to tell you. Things I should have told you a long time ago. It's in the box. I'm sorry, brother. For everything. Danny." Marcus read it once. Then again, slower, like maybe the second time the words would rearrange themselves into something different. Something that didn't mean what he knew it meant. The parking lot around him blurred at the edges. He was aware of the streetlight buzzing, the moths bumping against the glass. Tommy's small shoes shuffling nervously on the pavement in front of him. But none of it felt real. All he could see was the shaky handwriting. The words ran out of time. The words, "I'm sorry, brother." 8 years. 8 years of silence, of wondering, of telling himself Danny had just walked away, that he didn't matter enough to Danny anymore to be worth a phone call or a letter. 8 years Marcus had spent being angry at a man who, it turned out, had been running out of time the whole while. Danny was gone. Marcus felt the weight of it settle into his chest, heavy and sudden, like the 8 years had been holding their breath and had finally let it out all at once. His old army brother, the man who had pulled him out of a burning truck once without even thinking twice about his own safety, the man who used to laugh so loud it echoed off canyon walls, was gone. And Marcus hadn't even known he was sick. Hadn't known to say goodbye. Marcus folded the note back along its worn creases, careful as if it were made of glass, and looked down at the boy still standing there in the buzzing streetlight. "Come on," he said, tilting his head toward the garage. "Let's get you inside. Too many bugs out here." Tommy didn't argue. He just followed, the tin box clutched tight against his chest, like it was the only solid thing left in his world. Maybe it was. The garage smelled like it always did, motor oil and metal and old coffee. Marcus flipped on the office light, a bare bulb hanging over a metal desk covered in receipts and tools he kept meaning to put away. He pulled a stool out from the corner, the same one his mechanics used when they took their breaks, and set it down across from his desk chair. "Sit," he said, not unkindly. Tommy climbed up onto it, his sneakers dangling well above the concrete floor. He looked small in the office, smaller than he had outside. Marcus opened the little fridge under his desk, the one he kept stocked with cold drinks for the guys after a long shift, and pulled out a can of orange soda. He set it down in front of the boy. "Here," Marcus said. "Drink that." Tommy wrapped both hands around the can, like it might slip away from him, but he didn't open it. He just held it, watching Marcus with those red-rimmed eyes. Marcus sat down slow in his chair, the springs creaking under his weight, and unfolded the letter again. He hadn't finished it out there in the parking lot. He hadn't been able to. Now, under the steady light of the office, with the boy close enough to hear him breathing, he made himself read the rest. Bear. "I have to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. I got sick almost a year ago. Cancer. They caught it late, and it spread fast. I didn't tell you. I didn't tell anybody outside of Sarah and the doctors. I know that was wrong. I kept thinking I had more time. I kept thinking I'd call you when I was stronger, when I had the right words. But the words never came, and neither did the time. I passed 3 days ago, if you're reading this. Sarah's the one who's supposed to get this to you through Tommy, if I couldn't make it there myself. I made her promise. I know it's a strange way to do this, but I never was good at goodbyes, Bear. You know that about me." Tommy's a good boy. He's been through more than any kid his age should have to go through, watching me get weaker every day, trying to be brave about it because he thought that's what I needed. Sarah's strong, but she's tired, Bear. Tired in a way that goes all the way down to the bone. They don't have any family close by. Her folks passed years back, and mine were never much good to begin with. I'm asking you, as the last thing I'll ever ask you, to look after them. Just check on them. Make sure they're okay. I know it's a lot after everything, after all this silence between us. But you're the only one I trust with this, Bear. You always were, even when I was too much of a coward to say it out loud. I'm sorry, brother, for everything. I hope you can forgive me someday. Danny. Marcus read the last line twice, the way you'd press on a bruise just to feel if it still hurt. It did. It hurt more than he expected, more than he thought an old wound like this still could. He lowered the letter slowly and looked up. Tommy was still sitting on the stool, the soda can sweating in his small hands, untouched. His eyes were locked on Marcus, waiting, like he already knew what the letter said, but needed to see it land on somebody else's face too. Like he needed proof that he wasn't carrying this alone anymore. Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He just stared at the boy, this small, quiet stranger who was somehow Danny's son, who had no father now, who had walked into a stranger's garage carrying his father's last words and a rusted tin box, because there was nowhere else for him to go, and no one else left to carry it to. Marcus cleared his throat, the sound rough in the quiet office. "Your mom know where you are?" Tommy shook his head. "I snuck out. She was sleeping. She doesn't sleep much anymore, so when she finally does, I try not to bother her." Marcus nodded slow, filing that away. A boy of 10 shouldn't have to think about things like that, about letting his mother rest because rest was rare and precious. He stood up from his chair, joints popping the way they always did after a long day bent over engines. "Come on," he said. "I'll drive you home. Your mom's probably worried sick, even if she's asleep. That kind of worry doesn't need you awake to feel it." Tommy slid off the stool, the soda can still unopened in his hand. He looked at it, then set it carefully on the corner of Marcus's desk, like he didn't want to take anything that wasn't given to him twice. "You can bring it," Marcus said. "It's yours." The boy hesitated, then picked it back up and held it against his chest along with the tin box. Careful, like he was afraid of dropping either one. Marcus grabbed his keys off the hook by the door and led Tommy out through the garage, past the rows of tools hanging on the pegboard, past the old Harley he'd been rebuilding for the better part of 2 months. His truck sat out back, an old Ford the color of rust and time, dependable in the way only old things could be. He opened the passenger door for the boy, something he hadn't done for anyone in years, and waited while Tommy climbed up onto the bench seat. The engine turned over with a low growl, and Marcus pulled out of the lot, the streetlight sliding past in long yellow streaks across the windshield. "Where am I headed?" Marcus asked, keeping his eyes on the road, keeping his voice easy, like this was nothing, like his chest wasn't still tight from the letter folded in his jacket pocket. "Maple Street," Tommy said. "The apartments by the laundromat, number 6. Marcus knew the street. Everybody who'd lived in this town long enough knew it. A stretch of tired buildings on the edge of downtown, where the rent was cheap because nothing else about it was. "You and your mom been there long?" "Since before Dad got real sick," Tommy said. He was looking out the window now, watching the town go by. "We used to live in a house, a better one, but the doctor bills—" He trailed off, like he didn't have the rest of the sentence, or maybe like he'd heard his mother say those words so many times they didn't need finishing anymore. Marcus's jaw tightened. He thought of Danny, the boy he used to know, sharp and steady, the kind of man who always had a joke ready even when things were falling apart around him. He tried to picture that same man withering away in a hospital bed, watching his son grow up faster than he should have to, and it made something twist hard behind Marcus's ribs. "Your mom got a job?" he asked, keeping his tone light. "She used to work at the diner on 5th. She had to quit when Dad got real bad so she could take care of him. She's been looking for something else. It's hard, though. She says the bills are stacked up higher than she is." Tommy said it plainly, the way kids sometimes said things adults tried to soften, without knowing how heavy the words really were. Marcus didn't answer right away. He just drove, the truck rattling gently over the cracked pavement, past the shuttered storefronts and the flickering neon sign of the laundromat Tommy had mentioned. He turned onto Maple Street, the apartment complex coming into view, a low brick building with peeling paint and a row of doors facing a cracked parking lot. He slowed the truck, scanning the numbers on the doors until he found 6, and that's when he saw it. Boxes. Stacked outside the door, taped shut, some of them sagging under their own weight. A lamp without its shade leaned against the railing. A folded mattress rested on its side like it had been left there in a hurry. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. Something cold settled low in his stomach, the kind of feeling he hadn't had in years, not since the day his own life had been torn apart by lies he never told. He put the truck in park and sat there a moment, staring at the boxes through the windshield before he even reached for the door handle. Marcus killed the engine and sat for a moment, watching the door of apartment 6 through the dusty windshield. Then he opened his door and stepped down onto the cracked pavement, his boots crunching over bits of gravel. Tommy scrambled out the other side, the tin box still tucked under one arm, the soda can now warm in his hand. "Stay close," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure why he said it. Maybe because the boxes stacked by the door made his stomach twist tighter with every step closer. Before they reached the door, it swung open. A woman stood there, backlit by a bare bulb hanging in the hallway behind her. She was thin in a way that looked more like exhaustion than anything natural, her dark hair pulled back messy, strands falling loose around a face that had clearly not slept enough in a very long time. She wore a faded t-shirt and sweatpants, and her eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, went wide the second they landed on Marcus. "Tommy?" Her voice cracked as she stepped forward, then froze when she saw the size of the man standing beside her son. 6'2" of leather vest, gray-streaked beard, and arms covered in old ink. Her hand shot out and pulled Tommy toward her, half shielding him with her body, the way a mother does without even thinking about it. "Who are you?" she said. Sharp now, fear cutting through the tiredness in her voice. "What did you do, sneaking off like that? Do you know how scared I—" Her words tumbled over each other, panic and relief tangled together. "Mom, it's okay," Tommy said quickly, pulling free just enough to look up at her. "This is Bear, Dad's friend, the one he used to talk about." Sarah went still. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes moved from Tommy's face to Marcus's, searching, like she was trying to match the name against a memory buried deep, something she hadn't touched in years. Marcus watched it happen, watched the exact moment recognition landed, because her whole face changed. The tightness melted. The fear drained out, replaced by something raw, something that looked almost like grief mixed with relief. "Bear," she whispered. "Danny talked about you. He said, he used to say if things ever got bad, really bad, that you were the one person who'd show up." Her voice broke on the last word, and she pressed a hand to her mouth like she could hold the sound in. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice low and rough, careful the way a man is careful when he knows he's standing in the middle of something fragile. I'm sorry about Danny." Sarah's eyes filled, and she nodded fast, like she couldn't trust herself to speak. She stepped back from the doorway, waving them both inside with a shaking hand, and that's when Marcus saw the paper taped crooked to the doorframe, half torn at the corner. Bold red letters across the top. Notice of eviction. He didn't say anything. He just followed her in, ducking his head under the low frame, Tommy trailing behind him, still clutching the tin box. The apartment was small, nearly empty now, most of the furniture already gone or boxed. A single lamp sat on the floor, casting long shadows across bare walls. Sarah stood in the middle of it all, arms wrapped around herself, and then it seemed like something inside her just gave out. "They gave us until the end of the week," she said, the words spilling out fast now like a dam breaking. "The medical bills, they just kept coming even after he was gone. I couldn't keep up. I really tried, but there's nothing left. No family close by. My folks passed years ago, and Danny's parents, they've been gone since before we even met. I don't have anywhere to take him." She looked at Tommy, then covered her face with both hands, her shoulders shaking. "I don't know what we're going to do." Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes moving slowly around the stripped apartment, the taped boxes, the mattress leaning against the wall, the small tin box still clutched in Tommy's arms like it was the last solid thing left in the whole world. "Tommy," Sarah said, wiping her face fast with the back of her hand. Why don't you go finish packing your room? Just your clothes and your books. I'll come help in a minute." Tommy looked between the two adults, his eyes lingering on Marcus like he wasn't sure it was safe to leave him alone with his mother. But he nodded and went, still carrying the tin box, disappearing down the short hallway. A door clicked shut behind him. Sarah let out a long breath and sank down into one of the two kitchen chairs left in the apartment. The table between them was bare except for a stack of envelopes, some opened, some not. All of them the kind of official-looking mail nobody wants to open. "Sit," she said, waving weakly at the other chair. "If you want." Marcus lowered himself into it slowly, careful of his weight on the old wood. The chair creaked but held. For a moment neither of them said anything. Sarah stared at the stack of envelopes, like she could burn a hole through them with her eyes. "It started about 1.5 years ago," she finally said, her voice flat now, like she'd told this story so many times in her head that the words had worn smooth. "Danny started getting tired all the time. We thought it was just work, too many hours, not enough sleep. Then he started losing weight. Then the headaches." She reached out and touched the corner of one envelope, not opening it, just touching it. By the time the doctors figured out what it was, it had already spread. They gave him maybe 8 months. He held on for 14. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, but she pushed through. 14 months of treatments that cost more than we made in a year. Insurance covered some of it. Not enough. Never enough. Marcus sat still, his big hands folded on the table, listening the way he used to listen to men in the field who needed to talk and needed someone who wouldn't look away. "I picked up extra shifts at the diner," Sarah went on. "Worked nights when I could get someone to watch Tommy. But it wasn't enough, not with what the hospital wanted. So I started using the credit cards. Then I started missing payments here." She gestured at the empty apartment around them. "And now we're here. Boxes everywhere and nowhere to put them." "Nobody helped you?" Marcus asked, his voice rough and low. "Danny didn't want anybody to know how bad it got," she said. "He was proud. Stubborn, too, like somebody else I know." She glanced at Marcus, a flicker of something almost like a smile crossing her tired face before it faded again. "He kept saying he'd figure it out. Right up until the end, he kept saying that." Marcus looked down at his folded hands. The guilt sat heavy in his chest, thick and immovable, a stone he'd been carrying since Tommy first said his name in that parking lot. "He should have called me," Marcus said quietly. "He was ashamed," Sarah said. "Whatever happened between you two, whatever it was, he never told me the details. But I know he carried it. I know it ate at him some nights when he couldn't sleep." She shook her head slowly. "Now, I guess it doesn't matter anymore." The apartment was quiet, except for the faint sound of Tommy moving things around in his room, the soft thud of drawers opening and closing. Sarah pressed her palms flat against the table like she was trying to steady herself. "I've got until Friday to be out. After that, I don't know. Maybe a shelter. Maybe my car, if it comes to that. I keep telling myself something will work out, but I'm running out of somethings." Marcus felt the words rising up in his chest before he'd fully decided to say them. "I've got a place," he said. "Above my garage, small apartment, nothing fancy, but it's got a bed, a bathroom, a kitchen that works. It's sitting empty." Sarah's head came up sharp, her eyes locking onto his, surprise and something like suspicion flashing across her face. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I'm not asking," Marcus said, though even as the words came out, he felt the strangeness of them, the way they didn't sound like something he'd normally say. "It's there. Nobody's using it. Might as well." Sarah studied him for a long moment, her jaw tight, pride warring with something more desperate underneath. Just until I figure something else out, she said finally, quietly, like the words cost her something to say. Just temporary. Temporary, Marcus agreed, though neither of them sounded like they fully believed it. The morning came in gray and quiet, the kind of light that made everything look tired. Marcus pulled his truck up outside Sarah's building at 8 sharp, the engine rumbling low against the empty street. He'd barely slept, his mind turning over what he'd said the night before, wondering if he'd meant it, or if the words had just fallen out of him like loose change from a pocket. But there was no taking it back now. Not with Sarah already standing on the curb, a box in her arms, her face set in that same tight, careful way it had been since he'd met her. "Morning," he said, climbing out. "Morning," she answered, not quite meeting his eyes. Tommy came down next, wrestling with a box that was too big for him, his skinny arms wrapped around it like he was afraid it might get away. Marcus stepped in and took it from him before the boy could protest, hefting it easy onto his shoulder like it weighed nothing. "I could have carried it," Tommy said, a little put out. "I know," Marcus said. "Figured I'd save you the trouble anyway." Tommy almost smiled at that. Almost. They worked through the morning in a kind of rhythm, boxes coming down the narrow stairwell one after another, stacking into the bed of Marcus's truck. There wasn't much. A life, packed into maybe 15 boxes and a few pieces of furniture too worn to be worth much to anyone but the people who'd used them. A lamp with a crooked shade, a kitchen table with one wobbly leg, a mattress that Sarah insisted on tying down herself, checking the ropes twice like she didn't trust anyone else to get it right. Marcus didn't rush her. He let her work at her own pace, taking the boxes she handed him without comment, loading them careful and square like it mattered how they sat. By the time the truck bed was full, the apartment behind them stood empty, the door propped open, the rooms bare and echoing. Sarah stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking back into the place that had been her home, her eyes moving slow over the walls, like she was trying to memorize something she couldn't take with her. "We had good years here," she said quietly, mostly to herself. Before all this, Tommy took his first steps in that kitchen. Marcus didn't say anything. Some things didn't need an answer, just a witness. He stood there and let her have the moment, watching the way her jaw worked, the way she blinked fast a few times before turning away. "All right," she said finally, her voice steadier now. "Let's go." She pulled the door shut behind her, turned the key one last time, and dropped it into the mailbox slot like the landlord had told her to. It made a small metal sound when it hit the bottom, final and small. The drive to the garage didn't take long. Tommy sat squeezed between them in the truck's cab. Quiet, watching the buildings go by, his tin box balanced carefully on his knees the whole way, like it was the most important thing he owned. Maybe it was. When they pulled up outside the garage, Marcus led them around back, up the narrow wooden stairs to the apartment above. It was small, like he'd said, a little worn around the edges, but it was clean and dry, and the heat worked. They carried the boxes up one by one, Marcus taking the heavy ones, Sarah and Tommy handling what they could manage between them. On the last trip, Tommy carried a small framed photo, one Marcus hadn't noticed before, wrapped loose in a dish towel to keep the glass from cracking. Tommy set his box down just inside the door and unwrapped the photo, holding it up to the light from the window. It was Danny, younger, in his army uniform, his smile wide and easy, one arm slung around a buddy's shoulder that Marcus recognized as himself, 20 years younger and half as tired. Tommy stared at it a long moment, quiet, his small fingers tracing the edge of the frame. Marcus stood in the doorway watching him, something tightening in his chest. "I'll keep my word, Danny," he thought. "Whatever it takes." The sky outside was still more black than blue when Marcus came down the stairs behind the garage, pulling his jacket on over one shoulder. He hadn't planned on being up this early. Old habits, mostly. 20 years of waking before the sun had never quite left him, even now when there was no reason for it. He smelled the coffee before he saw the light. Sarah stood at the little counter in the kitchen nook, her back to him, pouring water into the machine like she'd done it 100 times already, though they'd only been here 4 days. Her hair was pulled back loose, and she wore an old sweater that looked like it belonged to somebody bigger than her, the sleeves rolled twice at the wrists. "Didn't expect anyone up," Marcus said. She turned, not quite startled, like she'd heard him on the stairs. "Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd make myself useful." "Coffee's usually my job," he said, nodding toward the machine. "I bought the grounds myself," she said. "Didn't want to use yours without asking." He almost laughed at that, but caught himself because she wasn't joking. "It's just coffee, Sarah." "I know." She poured 2 cups anyway, careful, precise, and set one on the counter for him. "I just don't want it to seem like we're taking over. This is your place." Marcus took the cup, leaned against the door frame. The steam curled up between them, and for a moment neither of them said anything. "Figured we should talk," he said finally. "Since you're going to be here a while, rules, or whatever you want to call it." Sarah nodded, straightening a little, like she'd been waiting for this. "Go ahead." "Kitchen's shared. Use whatever you need. I don't cook much anyway." He took a sip, thought a moment. "Bathroom schedule we'll figure out. Tommy's got school starting soon, so mornings might get tight." "I'll work around whatever you need," she said quickly. "You've done enough already, letting us stay here. I don't want to be in the way." "You're not in the way." He said it plain. No heat behind it, just fact. "This isn't charity, if that's what you're thinking. It's what your husband asked of me." Something flickered across her face at that, quick and gone. "I know what he asked. Doesn't make it easier to accept." "Don't have to make it easier," Marcus said. "Just have to let it happen." She looked at him for a long moment, like she was deciding whether to argue, then let out a breath instead, some of the stiffness easing from her shoulders. "Okay, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "Garage opens at 7. Gets loud down there. You'll hear it through the floor." "I don't mind noise," she said. "Means somebody's working. Danny used to say that. Noise means progress." Marcus didn't answer, just nodded, the name landing soft between them like something fragile passed hand to hand. He finished his coffee standing there, and when he set the cup in the sink, he heard footsteps on the stairs, slow and careful, like someone still half asleep. Tommy appeared in the doorway a moment later, hair sticking up on one side, wearing a t-shirt 2 sizes too big that used to belong to his dad. He blinked at the light like it surprised him. "Morning," Marcus said. "Morning," Tommy mumbled. He looked between the 2 adults, then at the empty coffee cups, then finally settled his gaze on Marcus. "Are you going down to the garage?" "In a bit," Marcus said. "Got a bike coming in today, needs a new chain." Tommy's eyes lit up at that, the sleep clearing from them fast. "Can I watch?" Marcus hesitated. He glanced at Sarah, who was watching too, careful, waiting to see what he'd say. "It's dangerous down there," Marcus said slowly. "Tools, machines, not a place for messing around." "I won't mess around," Tommy said quickly. I'll just watch, I promise. Marcus looked at the boy's face, hopeful and open in a way that was hard to say no to, the same look Danny used to get right before he talked Marcus into something he probably shouldn't agree to. He sighed, but it wasn't really a fight. All right, but you stay back where I tell you, and you don't touch nothing unless I say so. Tommy's whole face broke into a grin. Deal. The garage smelled like rubber and oil, a smell Tommy decided he liked more than he expected to. Monday morning, Marcus stood him by the workbench and pointed at a row of tools hanging on the pegboard wall, each one outlined in black marker so you'd know right where it went back. That's a socket wrench, Marcus said, tapping it. That's a torque wrench. Different animal, don't mix them up. Pliers, needle nose, regular. Screwdrivers, flathead, and Phillips. Tommy repeated each name under his breath, like he was memorizing spelling words for a test. Socket wrench, torque wrench. Good. Marcus nodded, short and approving. You'll learn faster if you say it out loud. From the doorway that led up to the apartment, Sarah stood with her arms crossed, watching. She'd come down with a basket of laundry as an excuse, though the machine was nowhere near this side of the garage. Every time Tommy got near a tool, her whole body went stiff, like she was ready to cross the floor in 2 steps if something went wrong. Marcus caught her watching on Tuesday, when he had Tommy check the oil on an old pickup truck parked just inside the bay doors. He showed the boy how to pull the dipstick, wipe it clean with a rag, slide it back in, and pull it out again to read the line. See where the oil sits? Marcus asked. Right there between the 2 marks. That's good. Too low, engine's thirsty. Too high, you got other problems. Tommy squinted at the dipstick like it held some kind of secret code. This one's good. That's right. Marcus took the dipstick back, slid it home. You just did your first real check. Sarah's voice came from the doorway, careful and light, but Marcus heard the worry underneath it. Is that safe? The engine's not on, right? Engine's off, Marcus said, not turning around, but not sharp about it either. Wouldn't have him near it if it wasn't. She didn't say anything else, but she didn't leave either. She stayed in the doorway most mornings that week, arms crossed, watching every move like she was cataloging risks in her head. Marcus noticed but didn't push her on it. He figured she'd come around at her own pace, same as everything else. By Thursday, Tommy could name half the tools on the wall without looking, and he'd taken to trailing Marcus around the garage like a shadow, notepad in hand, though he never actually wrote anything down. He just liked holding it, Marcus figured, like it made him look official. Friday came, and Marcus decided it was time for something bigger. You ready for an oil change? He asked, when Tommy showed up right after breakfast, still chewing on a piece of toast. Tommy nearly choked on it. A real one? Real one. Filter and everything. Marcus popped the hood on Sarah's old sedan, which had been due for a change anyway. I'll be right here. You just do what I tell you. Sarah appeared in the doorway almost immediately, like she'd been listening for exactly this moment. Marcus, he'll be fine, Marcus said, glancing over. I got him. Promise. She didn't argue, but her hands twisted together in front of her, knuckles pale. Marcus walked Tommy through it, slow, piece by piece. How to find the drain plug underneath, how to position the pan to catch the old oil, how to loosen the filter with the wrench. Careful, careful, don't strip the threads. Tommy's hands shook a little at first, small and unsure against the greasy metal, but he didn't stop. Didn't ask for help he didn't need. He worked his tongue between his teeth in concentration, the same look Danny used to get when he was fixing something stubborn, though Marcus didn't say that part out loud. When the old filter finally came loose and the last of the oil drained into the pan, Tommy let out a whoop that echoed off the garage walls. "I did it!" He held the old filter up like a trophy, grease smudged across his knuckles and one cheek. "Marcus, look, I did it." "You sure did." Marcus clapped a hand on the boy's shoulder, and for a second something warm moved through his chest, something he hadn't let himself feel in a long time. He looked toward the doorway. Sarah stood there, hand pressed against her mouth, and the worry that had lived on her face all week had softened into something else entirely. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since they'd arrived. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for teaching him." The next morning, Sarah found the shoebox. It sat on the corner of Marcus's desk in the little office at the front of the garage, the cardboard soft at the edges from years of handling. She'd come in looking for a stapler, something simple, and instead found the box stuffed with receipts, invoices, and scraps of paper that looked like they'd been shoved in there and forgotten. "Marcus." She held up a handful of the papers when he walked past the doorway. "What is this?" He glanced over, barely slowing down. "Paperwork." "I can see that. What's your system?" "System's the box." He kept walking toward the bay, wiping his hands on a rag. Sarah stood there a second, staring at the box like it had personally offended her. Then she set it down on the desk, pulled out the chair, and started sorting. By lunchtime, she had 3 piles going. Marcus came in to grab a water bottle from the little fridge and stopped in the doorway, watching her work through the mess with a pen tucked behind her ear. "What are you doing?" "Fixing this." She didn't look up. "Half these invoices are past due. You've got at least 2 customers who owe you money from months ago, and I found a receipt for parts you paid for twice because there's no record of the first payment." Marcus frowned. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to." She finally looked up at him, and there was something steady in her eyes, something that told him this wasn't up for debate. "But I want to. You've given Tommy and me a place to stay, food, everything. I'm not going to just sit here and let you keep doing that without giving something back." "Sarah." He set the water bottle down on the desk, leaned against the frame. "You don't owe me anything. That's not how this works." "Maybe not for you." Her voice softened, but there was steel underneath it. "But it's how it works for me. I need to be useful, Marcus. I need to feel like I'm pulling my weight. Please, let me do this." He studied her for a long moment. She looked tired, the same tired she'd looked every day since she and Tommy showed up. But there was something else in her face now, too. Purpose, maybe, like she'd found a piece of ground to stand on. "Fine," he said finally. "Have at it." She dove into that box like it was a puzzle she'd been waiting years to solve. Over the next few days, Marcus noticed the office starting to change. Papers that used to sit in messy stacks got filed into folders, labeled in Sarah's neat, careful handwriting. She found an old ledger book in a drawer and started writing everything down by hand, dates and amounts and names, until the whole thing started looking less like a junk drawer and more like an actual business. Friday afternoon, she called him into the office, tapping a stack of papers with her pen. "Look at this." She slid 3 invoices across the desk. "These are from customers who never paid. One's from 8 months ago. I called all 3 this morning. 2 are sending checks by next week. The 3rd one I'm still working on." Marcus picked up the invoices, flipping through them. He recognized the names, vaguely, jobs he'd done and then forgotten to follow up on because he'd been too busy with his hands under a hood to worry about paper. He did the math in his head, and his eyebrows went up. "That's almost $1,200. "Money you were owed," Sarah said. "Money that was just sitting here because nobody was tracking it." Marcus set the invoices down, slow, looking at her across the desk. He thought about all the years he'd run this place alone, throwing receipts in a box and hoping for the best, never once thinking there was a smarter way to do it. He'd built a good reputation with his hands, with his work, but he'd never once thought about the numbers side of things. Never had a reason to. Until now. "I need to say something," he said, and it came out slower than he meant it to, like the words were heavier than they should have been. "I've been running this place on instinct for 15 years. Didn't know how bad I needed this until you started digging through that box." Sarah's mouth curved, just slightly. "So you admit it. You need the help." "Yeah." Marcus nodded, and something in his chest loosened, easy and real. "I need the help." That evening, the garage went quiet, the way it always did after closing, the last light through the windows turning orange and then gray. Tommy was upstairs doing homework at the kitchen table, and Sarah sat on the old couch in the living room above the garage, going through a stack of mail with a cup of tea cooling beside her. Marcus stood in the doorway for a minute before he said anything. He'd learned that about himself lately, this habit of standing at the edge of a room, working up the nerve to ask for something instead of just taking it. Danny used to tease him about that, back in the army. "You walk into a firefight easier than you walk into a conversation, Bear." "Sarah." She looked up. "Yeah?" "That tin box." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Danny's box, the one Tommy brought me that first night." Something crossed her face, quick and careful. "What about it?" "I only looked at the note and the deed. Never went through the rest of it." He shifted his weight. "I was wondering if I could look through what's left, the photos, whatever else is in there. I want to understand him better. Those last years, I feel like I missed so much." Sarah set her mug down on the side table. For a second, she didn't say anything, and Marcus wondered if he'd asked for too much, if there were things in that box that belonged only to her and Tommy, things a wife keeps close. But then she nodded. Slow. "It's in the closet, bedroom closet, top shelf." She stood up. "I'll get it." She came back a minute later carrying the box, like it weighed more than it looked like it should. The tin was old, the paint chipped at the corners, a faded sticker of an eagle peeling off the lid. She set it down on the coffee table between them, and sat back down, folding her hands in her lap. "I haven't gone through all of it either," she admitted. "Some of it, right after he passed. But it got to be too much some days. I'd open it and just couldn't." Marcus lowered himself into the chair across from her, his big frame looking too large for the small piece of furniture. He reached out and lifted the lid. Inside, it was more crowded than he expected. Photographs curled at the edges, some in color and some black and white from years back. A few of them were of Danny in uniform, young and grinning, arms slung around a shoulder that Marcus recognized as his own. He hadn't seen a picture of himself that young in years. He'd forgotten he used to smile like that, easy and unguarded, before life had sanded it down to something quieter. There were receipts, too, some faded almost to nothing, and a couple of ticket stubs from a movie theater that had closed down over a decade ago. A dog tag, Danny's own, the chain broken. Marcus picked it up and held it in his palm for a moment before setting it aside gently, like it might break if he wasn't careful. Sarah watched him work through the layers without saying much, just sipping her tea, letting him take his time. Near the bottom of the box, under a folded flag and a small stack of Tommy's baby photos, Marcus's fingers brushed against something bound together with a rubber band, brittle and starting to crack. He pulled it out carefully. It was a bundle of envelopes, a dozen of them, maybe more, held together tight. He turned them over in his hands, and his chest went cold. His own name was written on the front of each one. Not Tommy's, not Sarah's. Marcus. Different years marked in the corner of some of them, Danny's handwriting shifting slightly over time, sometimes steady and sometimes shaky like it had been near the end. None of them had stamps, none of them had been mailed. Marcus stared at the top envelope, his thumb running over his own name written in ink that had faded but never disappeared. His hands started to shake. "Marcus?" Sarah's voice cut through the quiet, soft with concern. "What is it?" He couldn't answer right away. He just sat there, holding a stack of letters that a dead man had written to him and never sent. Over years, Marcus didn't even know they'd been apart in spirit as much as distance. Marcus carried the bundle to his room and shut the door soft behind him. The garage below had gone dark and silent, and the only light now came from the lamp on his nightstand, a small yellow circle that fell across the bedspread. He sat on the edge of the bed, the letters in his lap, and for a long moment he just looked at them without moving. He'd carried men out of worse places than this. He'd stood over graves and said nothing because there was nothing to say. But his hands shook now, holding paper. He slid the rubber band off. It cracked and fell apart in 2 pieces, brittle from years of waiting. The first letter was dated almost 8 years back, not long after Danny had gone quiet. Marcus unfolded it slow, like it might crumble. Bear. "I don't know how to start this, so I'm just going to write it plain. You're going to hate me for a while, maybe forever. I need you to know that whatever you think happened, it isn't what you think. I saw them, Marcus. Renner and 2 of his guys. I saw them plant that stuff in your saddlebag the night before the raid. I was 20 feet away behind Miller's truck, and I froze. I didn't say anything. I told myself I'd go to the club, tell someone, make it right. But then it all moved so fast and you got hauled in, and I still didn't say anything, and by the time I got my nerve up, it was too late. The story had already hardened into truth. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Marcus set the letter down. His jaw was tight, his eyes stinging in a way he didn't have a name for. He remembered that night, the flashing lights, the cold cuffs, the way men he'd ridden with for a decade looked at him like he was something they'd scraped off a boot. He remembered thinking, somewhere in the middle of it, "Where's Danny?" And Danny had been 20 feet away the whole time, watching. He picked up the next one. Bear. "I keep telling myself I'll mail these. I write them and then I put them in the box instead. Coward's move, I know. But if I send them, I have to face what I did, and I'm still working on fixing it instead. I started asking around. Quiet. Nobody knows it's me. There's a guy who used to run with Renner, does odd work now, drinks at a place off Route 9. He remembers things. I bought him a few beers. He talked." Marcus read on, letter after letter, watching the years pass in Danny's handwriting. The early ones were guilty, raw, almost pleading. The later ones grew steadier, more like reports. Names, dates, a garage in the next county where Renner had once stashed stolen parts, a cousin who'd helped Renner switch out invoices to cover his tracks. Danny had been collecting it all like a man building a case, one brick at a time, alone. "Bear, I found the guy who actually sold the stuff Renner planted on you. He's willing to talk if it ever comes to that. I know it's taken years. I should have come to you the day it happened. I keep telling myself once I have enough, I'll show up at your door and hand you the truth instead of an apology. An apology alone isn't worth much. Proof is." Marcus's chest ached with each line. He thought of the years he'd spent quietly hating the silence between them, assuming Danny had simply drifted, or worse, judged him. He had never once imagined this, never imagined Danny out there working in the dark, alone, trying to fix something Marcus hadn't even known was breakable. The last letter in the stack was shorter than the others, the handwriting different, thinner and less steady, like the hand that wrote it didn't have much strength left. "Bear. The doctors are saying things now I don't want to write down. I'm scared, not for me, but for Sarah and Tommy. I never told you why I really stayed away all these years. It wasn't just guilt. I was scared that if Renner knew I was digging, he'd come after you to shut it down, and I couldn't live with that being my fault twice. So I did it quiet. I did it alone. I thought I had more time to finish it right and bring it to you myself. I didn't. I'm sorry, brother. I should have trusted you with this a long time ago. I should have trusted us. Marcus sat frozen on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in his hands, the lamplight blurring through the wetness in his eyes. The room was silent except for his own breathing, ragged and slow, the weight of 8 years of assumed betrayal collapsing all at once into something far heavier. 8 years of a friend, unseen, standing guard. Morning came gray and quiet, the kind of light that made everything look tired. Marcus stood at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched, staring at nothing in particular. The letters were folded back in their bundle, tucked in the drawer of his nightstand, but they sat in his mind like stones. He hadn't slept much. His eyes felt scraped raw, and his shoulders carried a weight that had nothing to do with muscle. Sarah came down the stairs in one of Danny's old flannel shirts, sleeves rolled up past her elbows. She stopped in the doorway when she saw him, reading something in the set of his back before he even turned around. "You didn't come down for breakfast," she said. "Tommy asked where you were." "Wasn't hungry." She studied him a moment longer, then poured her own coffee, moving slow and careful like she was giving him room to talk if he wanted it. He didn't. He stared at the counter like it might have answers written on it. "Marcus." Her voice was soft, but it had a firmness under it, the same kind she used when she meant business. "Something happened. You've had that same look since last night." He set his cup down harder than he meant to. Coffee sloshed over the rim. "Found some letters," he said finally. "And Danny's things. He wrote them to me. Never sent them." Sarah's face went still. "What did they say?" Marcus looked at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw something crack open behind his eyes. Not anger, something closer to grief, wide and old and finally let loose. 8 years ago I got framed," he said. "Stuff got planted on me, stuff that wasn't mine, and it ruined my name in the club. People I rode with for 10 years looked at me different after that, like I was dirt." His jaw worked. "I always figured Danny just walked away from me. Figured he judged me same as everybody else. That's why he went quiet." "But that's not what happened," Sarah said slowly. "No." Marcus's voice cracked, just barely, just enough. He saw it happen, saw the men who did it, planting the evidence. He was right there and he froze, and by the time he found his nerve, it was too late to stop the story from sticking. He spent years after that, quiet, alone, trying to find proof. Chasing down names, buying drinks for guys who might talk, building a case, brick by brick, so he could come to me and hand me the truth instead of just an apology. He stopped, throat working, and Sarah didn't say anything, just waited, letting him get the rest out. He was scared, Marcus said. Scared that if the wrong people knew he was digging, they'd come after me to shut it down. So he did it alone. Didn't tell me. Didn't tell you, probably. Carried that whole thing by himself for 8 years, right up until he got too sick to finish it. Sarah's eyes filled, but she blinked it back, reaching out to rest a hand on his arm. "Marcus." "I hated him," Marcus said, quiet now, almost ashamed. "All those years, I told myself I didn't care, but I did. I missed him, and I hated him at the same time, and the whole time he was out there standing guard over something I didn't even know was broken." "He never stopped being your brother," Sarah said. "Not for one day, you know that now." Marcus shook his head, like he still couldn't quite hold the shape of it. "I don't deserve that kind of loyalty." "Yes, you do," Her voice was firm, sure. A man doesn't spend 8 years chasing the truth for somebody he doesn't believe in. Danny knew who you were, Marcus. Better than you know yourself, maybe. That's what those letters prove. Not that you did something wrong. That you're worth fighting for. Something in Marcus's chest gave way then, quiet at first, just a tightening in his throat, and then his eyes filled and spilled over before he could stop them. He didn't turn away. He let her see it, standing there in the kitchen with the gray morning light coming through the window, his shoulders shaking just slightly. Tommy appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, and stopped when he saw. He didn't say anything. He just walked over and wrapped his arms around Marcus's waist, pressing his face into his side. Marcus put a hand on the boy's head, and for the first time since Danny died, he let himself cry. The clubhouse sat at the edge of town, a squat brick building with a gravel lot and a faded sign that read Iron Road MC. Marcus had ridden past it 100 times in the last 8 years without stopping. Today he pulled in slow, gravel crunching under his tires, and killed the engine. The folder sat in his saddlebag, thick with copies Danny had made. Statements, photographs, a recorded confession from a man named Petey Sloan, who used to run with Vic Renner and had apparently grown a conscience somewhere along the way, or maybe just grown tired of carrying the weight. Danny had done the work of 10 men. Marcus just had to carry it through the door. He found Ray Delgado inside, the club's president, a heavyset man in his 60s with a gray beard and eyes that had seen everything twice. Ray was drinking coffee at the bar, going over paperwork, and he looked up when Marcus walked in like he'd been expecting him for years without knowing it. "Bear," Ray said, just that. Nobody had called him that in this building for a long time. "Ray, need to talk to you and whoever else still sits on the council." Marcus set the folder on the bar. "About what happened 8 years ago." Ray's eyes went to the folder, then back to Marcus's face. Something passed between them, old and complicated, years of distance folding down into a single look. "That's a door you sure you want to open again?" "I'm sure." Ray studied him a long moment, then nodded slowly and picked up his phone. By evening, 5 men sat around the long table in the back room, the same table where Marcus had once stood accused with nothing to say in his defense. The room smelled like leather and old cigarette smoke. Ray sat at the head. 2 other senior members, Hutch and Big Sal, flanked him, arms crossed, faces unreadable. Marcus stood at the far end, the folder open in front of him, and he told the story the way Danny had written it. Slow, careful, every fact laid out like a brick in a wall. He explained about the planted evidence. He named names. He showed the statements, the photographs, the recording, playing Petey Sloan's shaky voice through a cheap speaker, admitting what he'd seen, what he'd done, who had ordered it. Vic Renner's name came up more than once, tangled up in old grudges and a hunger to knock Marcus down so he could climb up in his place. Nobody spoke while the recording played. When it ended, the silence in the room was heavy, like a held breath. Hutch was the first to break it. 8 years, he muttered, shaking his head. We ran a good man out over 8 years of nothing. We didn't run him out, Big Sal said quietly. We just stopped standing next to him. Ray leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. He looked older suddenly, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Bear, he said, I'm sorry. I should have dug deeper back then. Should have trusted you more than the rumor. You didn't know, Marcus said. None of you did. That's on Vic, not you. Ray nodded slowly, then looked around the table at the other men, silent question passing between them. One by one, they nodded back. Then it settled, Ray said, voice firm now, carrying the weight of a decision made. Marcus Cole's name is clear, fully, officially. Whatever was said about him before, it's wiped clean, and anybody who's got a problem with that can bring it to me directly." He stood, extending a hand across the table. "Welcome back, Bear." Marcus shook it, throat tight, unable to find words big enough for the moment. The other men rose too, one after another, shaking his hand, clapping him on the shoulder, saying things like, "Good to have you back," and "Never should have doubted you." It didn't undo 8 years. It didn't bring Danny back. But it was something solid, something true, standing where a lie used to be. By the time Marcus walked out into the cool night air, the weight in his chest had lifted in a way he hadn't felt in years. He swung his leg over his bike, started the engine, and felt it rumble beneath him like something alive. He rode home fast, the wind cutting clean across his face, and for the first time in a long while, he felt light enough to fly. He couldn't wait to tell Sarah and Tommy. The garage above the apartment glowed warm with lamplight when Marcus pulled in. He could see Sarah through the window, moving around the little kitchen, and Tommy sitting at the table doing something with a stack of napkins, folding them wrong on purpose just to make his mom laugh. Marcus sat on his bike a minute longer than he needed to, just looking at that window like it was something precious he wasn't sure he'd earned yet. When he walked in, Sarah took one look at his face and put down the spoon she was holding. "Well?" she said. "It's done," Marcus said. "My name's clear. Whole council signed off on it." Tommy jumped up from his chair so fast it nearly tipped over. "Really? Like, for real, for real?" For real," Marcus said, and something in his chest loosened just saying it out loud a second time. Sarah crossed the kitchen and hugged him, quick and fierce, the kind of hug that says more than words could. "Danny would be so proud of you," she said quietly into his shoulder. "Proud of both of you." They ate dinner slow that night, nobody in a hurry to leave the table. Sarah had made spaghetti. Nothing fancy, but it felt like a feast. Tommy talked with his mouth full about how he wanted to learn to fix a real engine now, not just check oil. And Marcus found himself laughing in a way that surprised him, easy and unguarded. After the plates were cleared, Sarah brought out the tin box. It had been sitting on the shelf in the living room for weeks now, mostly emptied, its secrets given up one by one. The letters were already read. The photographs already looked through 100 times. There wasn't much left inside it but a few loose buttons, an old dog tag, and a folded flag from Danny's discharge. "I keep thinking there's nothing left in there," Sarah said, setting it on the table between them. "But I can't bring myself to put it away yet." Marcus turned the box over in his hands, feeling the weight of it, the dents in the metal, the rust creeping along one edge. He'd carried this box for weeks now, like it was something fragile and holy. He ran his thumb along the bottom edge, the same way he had a dozen times before, and this time he noticed something. A seam. Thin, almost invisible, running along the inside base of the tin. "Sarah," he said slowly, "did you ever check if this thing had a false bottom?" She frowned. "A what?" "Guys used to do it in the army. Hide things under a false panel." He pressed his thumbnail into the seam and felt it give, just slightly, like it had been waiting all this time for someone to notice. Danny probably knew guys who did the same. Tommy leaned in close, eyes wide. "Is there a secret compartment? Like in the movies?" "Let's find out," Marcus said. He worked the panel loose carefully, not wanting to force it, not wanting to break whatever last piece of Danny might be hiding underneath. The metal creaked in protest, then lifted away in his hands, revealing a shallow space beneath it. Folded flat inside was a plain white envelope, yellowed slightly at the edges, sealed with a strip of tape that had long since dried and curled up at the corners. The kitchen went quiet. Sarah's hand found Tommy's shoulder without either of them seeming to notice they'd reached for each other. Marcus lifted the envelope out like it might crumble in his hands. He set the empty tin down and turned the envelope over. No name on it, no note, just paper, folded twice, tucked away for years under a lie of empty space. "Open it," Sarah whispered. Marcus peeled back the tape, careful and slow, and slid out the papers inside. They were legal papers, official, stamped with a county seal in the corner, the kind of document that had sat in some drawer for years without anyone else ever laying eyes on it. He unfolded them fully and read the heading at the top, and his breath caught somewhere in his throat. It was a deed. A property deed, dated 8 years back, right around the time everything had fallen apart between him and Danny. A small plot of land out on the edge of town, 5 acres, zoned for commercial use, and down at the bottom, in the space for the buyer's name, Danny had written 2 names side by side. Daniel Reyes, Marcus Cole. Nobody said anything for a long moment. The lamp buzzed faintly overhead. Tommy looked at the paper, then at Marcus, then back at the paper again, like he was trying to understand something too big for the room to hold. Marcus found the plot easy enough, even after 8 years of nobody tending it. The address on the deed matched a stretch of land just past the edge of town, where the road turned to gravel and the streetlights gave up trying. He parked the truck at the edge of a ditch, and the 3 of them climbed out into the cold morning air. The lot was 5 acres of weeds and scrub grass, taller than Tommy in some places, with a rusted chain-link fence sagging along one side. An old oak tree stood near the back, its branches bare and reaching. Somewhere under all that overgrowth, Marcus figured, there was flat ground. Good ground. "This is it?" Sarah asked, pulling her coat tighter against the wind. She didn't sound disappointed, just surprised. Maybe she'd pictured something already built, something finished, instead of a field full of weeds and forgotten dreams. "This is it," Marcus said. Tommy ran ahead, kicking through the tall grass, his sneakers already soaked from the dew. "Watch out for snakes, buddy," Marcus called after him, though his heart wasn't really in the warning. He was too busy looking around, seeing the place the way Danny must have seen it once. He could picture it if he let himself. A long metal building with 3 bay doors, big enough to work on trucks as well as bikes. A gravel lot out front for parking. A sign out by the road, lit up at night so folks driving by would know the place was there. "He used to talk about this," Marcus said, mostly to himself. "Back before everything went sideways. Said he wanted a garage where a guy could bring his car and trust the guy fixing it. Said there weren't enough places like that left." Sarah walked a slow circle, her arms crossed, studying the land like she was trying to see what Marcus saw. "He never told me the specifics, just that he had a plan. I thought it was one of those things guys talk about and never do." "He did it," Marcus said, tapping the folded deed in his jacket pocket. "He just never got the chance to build it." Tommy came running back, breathless, his cheeks pink from the cold. "Uncle Bear, there's an old tire back there, and I think there used to be a driveway. Look, you can kind of see where the gravel is." Marcus walked over and looked where Tommy was pointing. Sure enough, beneath the weeds, there was a faint path of gravel, half sunk into the dirt. Danny had started something here. Not much, but something. Marcus stood there a long moment looking at that gravel path, feeling the years pile up behind him. He thought about all the letters, all the sacrifice, all the silence Danny had carried alone so Marcus wouldn't have to carry it with him. "I'm going to build it," Marcus said. Sarah turned to look at him. "Marcus." "I mean it, right here. Reyes and Cole, like he wanted." He looked at her, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel unsure saying what came next. And I want you running the books, doing the real work, not just helping out. A real job, Sarah. You're better with numbers than any of us." Sarah's eyes went bright, and she pressed her lips together like she was fighting to keep herself steady. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to," Marcus said. "I want to." Tommy tugged on his sleeve. "What about me? Can I really learn everything? Like actual mechanic stuff, not just checking oil?" Marcus crouched down so he was eye level with the boy. "I'll teach you everything your dad would have taught you. Engines, transmissions, all of it. Real training. That's a promise." Tommy threw his arms around Marcus's neck so fast it nearly knocked him backward into the weeds. Sarah laughed, wiping her eyes, and for a moment the three of them just stood there in that overgrown lot, wind moving through the grass, the old oak tree creaking overhead like it approved. That was when Marcus's phone rang. He almost didn't answer it, wanting to stay in that moment a little longer. But the number on the screen was one he hadn't seen in years. A number tied to a name from a life he thought he'd closed the door on for good. He looked at the screen, then at Sarah, and something cold moved through his chest. "I need to take this," he said. Marcus walked a few steps away, phone pressed to his ear, boots crunching through the frozen grass. "Yeah," he said. "This is Marcus." "Bear, it's Frankie Dobbs." The voice was rough, older than Marcus remembered, but he placed it right away. Frankie had ridden with the club for years before he'd drifted off to some Chapter 2 states over. They'd never been close, but Frankie was the kind of man who kept his ear to the ground, who knew things before they became common knowledge. "Been a long time," Marcus said, glancing back at Sarah and Tommy, who were still exploring the edge of the lot, Tommy poking at the old tire with a stick. "Yeah, well, I heard some things came out about that old business. The frame job. Heard your name's clean now." Frankie paused, and Marcus could hear traffic in the background, like Frankie was standing outside somewhere, maybe a gas station or a bar. "Figured you'd want to know. Vic Renner's been hearing about it too. And he ain't happy, Bear. Ain't happy at all." Marcus's jaw tightened. Vic Renner. The name landed like a fist to the chest, old anger rising up fast and hot. Vic had been there the night everything went wrong, all those years ago. Vic had helped bury Marcus's name in dirt so deep it had taken Danny's whole life to dig it back out. "What's he saying?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice level even though his grip on the phone had gone white-knuckled. "Talking around the clubhouse, saying you're twisting the story, saying the evidence was planted by somebody else trying to set him up, trying to get ahead of it before it gets ahead of him. You know how he is. Always was better at talking than fixing what he broke." "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "I know how he is. Just figured you should be ready. Man like that don't like losing his standing, especially not to somebody he spent years trying to bury." Frankie's voice softened, just slightly. "You did good clearing your name, Bear. Don't let him drag you back into the mud over it." Marcus thanked him and hung up, standing there a moment with the wind cutting across the empty lot. He looked at Sarah and Tommy, still laughing about something near the old oak tree, still wrapped up in the hope of 5 acres of weeds turning into something real. He didn't want to tell them yet. Not until he had to. 3 days later, Marcus was under a truck in his garage, wrench in hand, when he heard the low growl of a motorcycle pulling into the lot outside. He recognized the sound before he even rolled out from under the vehicle. Some things you never forgot, no matter how many years passed. Vic Renner walked in like he owned the place, boots heavy on the concrete, leather vest creaking with every step. He hadn't changed much. Same hard eyes, same permanent sneer, just more gray in his beard and a little more weight around his middle. "Heard you cleared your name," Vic said, not bothering with a greeting. "Heard you got some fancy evidence. Some paper trail Danny put together before he kicked it." Marcus set down his wrench, slow and deliberate, wiping his hands on a rag as he stood. "Careful how you talk about him." "I'll talk about him however I want," Vic said, stepping closer. "That evidence goes public the way you want it to. My name's in the mud right along with yours. And I ain't going down for something that was buried 8 years ago. I'll tell folks a different story if I have to. Tell them you're the one twisting things around, trying to make yourself look clean by making me look dirty." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest, old instincts rising up, the ones that used to solve problems with fists instead of words. He pushed them down hard and stepped forward instead, until he was close enough that Vic had to tilt his head up to hold his eyes. "Get off my property," Marcus said, voice low and even. "This ain't over, Bear." "I said get off my property, Vic." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Now." Vic held his gaze a moment longer, jaw working like he wanted to say more, then turned and walked back toward his bike, boots crunching over the gravel. He swung a leg over, started the engine with a roar, and pulled out of the lot without looking back. Marcus stood there in the sudden quiet, hands still shaking, watching the dust settle behind Vic's taillights. That night, the kitchen light hummed above the table, casting a soft yellow glow over 2 mugs of tea that had long gone cold. Marcus sat across from Sarah, his big hands wrapped around his mug like he needed something to hold on to. Tommy was asleep upstairs, worn out from a day of chasing the barn cats that lived near the old shed on the property. Sarah hadn't said much since dinner. She'd pushed her food around her plate, and Marcus had noticed, the way he noticed most things now, quiet and watchful. He hadn't pushed her to talk. He knew better than that. Some things came out on their own time, if you gave them room. "Tommy asked me today why you looked so tired," Sarah finally said, her eyes fixed on the steam that wasn't rising from her tea anymore. "I told him you were just working hard. But that's not it, is it?" Marcus set his mug down. He thought about lying, just for a second. The old habit of keeping things locked up tight where nobody could touch them. But that wasn't fair to her. Not after everything. "Vic Renner came by the garage a few days back," he said. "Made some threats. Nothing I can't handle." Sarah's hands tightened around her own mug. "Nothing you can't handle," she repeated, her voice flat. "Marcus, that's what Danny used to say too. Right before things got bad. Right before he started disappearing for hours. Coming home with that look on his face like he was carrying the whole world and couldn't tell me why." Marcus stayed quiet, letting her get it out. He could see her hands were trembling now, just slightly, the tremor she usually hid so well. "I watched him waste away," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "I watched him get sick and never tell me how bad it really was, because he didn't want me scared. And now I'm sitting here with a man who says nothing I can't handle, like that's supposed to make me feel better." She wiped at her eyes fast, angry at herself for crying. "I can't do that again, Marcus. I can't watch somebody else disappear into some danger they won't talk about. Not with Tommy in the house. Not after everything he's already lost." "Sarah." Marcus leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "I'm not Danny. I'm not disappearing on you. Vic's all noise, empty threats, nothing more." "You don't know that," she said. "You don't know what a man like that will do when he's cornered. I've seen it before, Marcus. Danny used to say the same thing about people from his old life. Said they were harmless, said it was nothing to worry about. And look what it cost him. Look what it cost all of us." Marcus reached across the table, careful, slow, and covered her hand with his own. It was rough and calloused against her cold fingers, but he kept it gentle. "I would never let anything happen to Tommy. Or to you." You have my word. Sarah pulled her hand back, not unkindly, but firm, like she needed the space to think straight. Your word, she said quietly. That's what everybody says right before things fall apart. She stood up from the table, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, even though the kitchen was warm. I've been thinking, she said, not looking at him now. Maybe it's time Tommy and I moved on, found somewhere quiet, somewhere none of this old business can follow us, somewhere safe. The words hit Marcus like a fist to the gut, worse than anything Vic Renner could ever throw his way. He opened his mouth, wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that this was safe, that he was safe, that he could protect them both with everything he had. But the look on her face stopped him. She wasn't asking his permission. She was telling him what she needed to survive. I just need to think, Sarah said, softer now, like she could see the hurt written plain across his face. I'm not saying it's decided. I just need to think, Marcus. She turned and walked toward the stairs, leaving him alone in the kitchen with 2 cold mugs of tea and a silence that pressed in from every corner of the room. Marcus sat there for a long time after she'd gone, staring at nothing, his chest hollowed out by the thought of losing them both. The morning of the groundbreaking came up bright and cold, the kind of sharp autumn air that made a man's breath show in front of his face. Marcus stood on the empty plot of land that Danny had bought all those years ago, boots planted in the dirt, looking at the little group that had gathered. It wasn't much. A few guys from the club, standing back respectful in their leather. Old Pete from the hardware store, who'd known Danny back in the day, and Sarah and Tommy, standing off to the side near the folding chairs someone had set up. Marcus had spent the whole week planning this. He'd told himself it wasn't about winning Sarah back. It was about honoring Danny. But if he was being honest with himself, some small part of him hoped that seeing the dream come to life, right there in the dirt, might remind her why she'd wanted to stay in the first place. Tommy ran up to him, his sneakers kicking up little clouds of dust. Uncle Bear, is this really going to be it? Is this where the garage is going to go? This is it, buddy. Marcus crouched down so he was eye level with the boy. Right here. Your dad picked this spot years ago. Said it had good bones. Tommy looked around at the empty lot like he was trying to see the garage already standing there, walls and roof and all. Can I help dig? Dad would have wanted me to help dig. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest, but he nodded and handed Tommy a small shovel he'd brought special, one that fit a kid's hands. Your dad would have been real proud of you for wanting to. They walked together to the spot, marked off with stakes and string, right where the front office would go. Marcus lifted the ceremonial shovel, the big one, gold painted for the occasion, something Pete had insisted on, even though Marcus thought it was silly. Tommy stood next to him with his smaller one. On 3, Marcus said. 1, 2, 3. They dug into the ground together, turning over the first shovelfuls of dirt while the small crowd clapped. Tommy's face lit up like Marcus had never seen before. Pure joy. No shadow of grief on it for once. He held up his shovel like a trophy. We did it, Uncle Bear, we did it. That we did, Marcus said, and for a moment, just a moment, he let himself believe things were going to be fine. The rest of the morning passed in that same easy light. Pete told stories about Danny from years back, the fool things he used to say, the way he'd always talked about running his own shop someday. The club guys shook Marcus's hand, told him they were proud, told him it was good to see something being built instead of something falling apart for a change. Tommy ran around showing anybody who'd listen where the garage bays were going to be, pointing at empty air like he could already see the walls. Sarah stood at the edge of it all, arms crossed against the cold, a small smile on her face as she watched her son laugh and dig and dream. Marcus caught her eye once, and for just a second, Something passed between them. Something that felt like it used to before that night in the kitchen. But when the crowd started to thin, when Pete loaded up his truck and the club guys rode off down the gravel road, Sarah walked over to Marcus slow, her arms still wrapped tight around herself. "It was a good day," she said quietly. "Tommy needed this, needed to see something good come out of all this mess." "Yeah," Marcus said. "He did." Sarah looked out at the empty lot, the stakes and string marking out walls that didn't exist yet, the dirt Tommy had turned over with his own 2 hands. "I still think about leaving, Marcus," she said, not looking at him now. "I know today was good. I know it meant something. But it doesn't change what I said. It doesn't change what I'm scared of." Marcus didn't say anything. There wasn't anything left to say that he hadn't already said. "I need more time," Sarah said. And then she turned, walking toward the car where Tommy was already waiting, still holding his little shovel like it was the greatest gift anyone had ever given him. Marcus stood alone in the dirt, watching her go, the gold shovel heavy and useless in his hands, wondering if this was the last time he'd ever stand on this land with any hope left in his chest. Marcus was halfway through his coffee at the diner counter when he heard the bikes pull up outside. He knew the sound of Vic Renner's Harley the way some men knew a bad cough. It rattled a little on the left side, always had, ever since Vic laid it down on Route 9 years back and never got the frame straightened right. He set down his mug and looked out the window. Vic was climbing off his bike slow, taking his time about it, letting the diner windows fill up with faces watching him do it. 2 other guys came with him, younger, the kind that followed Vic around, hoping some of his old standing might rub off on them. Marcus paid for his coffee and walked outside, because there wasn't any sense hiding in a booth when a man wanted to make a scene. Better to meet it standing up. Cole. Vic said his name like it tasted bad in his mouth. "Heard you're building yourself a nice little shop. Heard you got yourself a widow and a kid to play house with, too. Real touching. Say what you came to say, Vic." Marcus kept his voice flat and even. A few people had stopped on the sidewalk already. An older woman with grocery bags, 2 men from the feed store across the road, a couple of kids on bikes who'd braked hard when they saw the crowd forming. Vic turned, playing to them now, raising his voice so it carried. "You all know this man. Know what he did? Years back, before some of you were even living in this town, this man put a good rider in the hospital over a debt. Broke his hand so bad he never rode again." Vic held up his own hand, flexed the fingers slow like he was showing off a wound. "That's on record. That's fact. And now he wants you all to forget it. Wants you thinking he's some kind of hero because he took in a dead man's family." "That's not what happened, and you know it," Marcus said. His hands stayed loose at his sides, but his jaw was tight enough to ache. "That's what the report said." Vic smiled, slow and mean. "Funny how a man can dig up a friend's letters and suddenly the whole world's supposed to believe a different story. Convenient, that." More people had gathered now. Marcus could feel the weight of their eyes, could hear the low murmur passing between them. The kind of murmur that meant minds were already halfway made up, before all the facts were even out. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't take a step toward Vic, though every old instinct in his body wanted to. Instead, he said, quiet enough that the crowd had to lean in to catch it, "You planted that evidence yourself, Vic. Danny knew it. He spent years proving it. I've got the papers to show for it, and when the time comes, I'll show every one of these people standing here." Vic's smile flickered, just for a second before it came back harder. Big talk from a man who's been hiding behind a dead man's name for months. Across the street, half a block down, Sarah had come out of the pharmacy with Tommy at her side, a small paper bag of cough medicine in her hand. She stopped cold when she saw the crowd, saw Marcus standing in the middle of it with Vic squared up in front of him, saw the way the whole street seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what happened next. Tommy tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, that's Uncle Bear. What's going on?" Sarah didn't answer. She just stood there, gripping the paper bag so tight it crinkled, watching Marcus stand his ground against a man who looked like trouble walking on two legs, watching the crowd's faces shift between doubt and curiosity, watching her son's uncle be dragged right back into the world she'd hoped they were leaving behind. She pulled Tommy close and steered him away before the crowd could break up, before Marcus could see them standing there. But the sight of it stayed lodged behind her ribs the whole walk home, heavy and cold. That night, after Tommy had gone up to bed, Sarah came down to the garage where Marcus was locking up for the night. She had a duffel bag already half-packed, sitting by the stairs. "I saw you today," she said, "outside the diner. The whole street saw you." Marcus set down his keys slow. "Sarah, we're leaving by the end of the week." Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady, the kind of steady that came from a decision already made. "I can't do this again, Marcus. I can't watch Tommy grow up in the middle of this." She turned and went back up the stairs, and Marcus stood there in the dark garage, keys still in his hand, saying nothing at all. Marcus sat alone in the office above the garage, the lamp throwing a small circle of yellow light on the desk. Outside, the night was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that pressed in on a man and made him hear his own heartbeat. He hadn't turned on the big light. Didn't want to see the rest of the room, the boxes Sarah hadn't finished unpacking, the drawing Tommy had taped to the wall of 3 stick figures standing in front of a garage, with a crooked sign that said, "Raise and Coal." He just wanted the small circle of light and the box in front of him. Danny's tin box sat open on the desk. Marcus had already read every letter inside it a dozen times over the past months. He knew the shape of Danny's handwriting the way he knew the sound of his own bike idling. Knew which words came shaky from the sickness and which ones came shaky from something else, something harder to name. Grief, maybe. Or fear. He pulled the letters out again anyway, one by one, looking for something he might have missed the first 10 times through, though he couldn't have said what. Maybe he just needed to hear Danny's voice again, even if it was only ink on paper gone soft at the folds. The first few letters he already knew by heart. Danny explaining the frame job. Danny explaining why he ran instead of coming to Marcus straight out. Why he thought silence would protect him better than the truth would. Marcus's chest ached reading them again, same as it always did. But there was nothing new there, nothing that helped him now, sitting in the dark with Sarah's duffel bag packed at the bottom of the stairs. He almost put the letters away. His hand was actually reaching for the lid of the tin box when he noticed a page stuck flat against the bottom, thin as paper could get, easy to miss if a man wasn't looking close. He'd flipped past it every time before, thinking it was just the lining of the box. He peeled it up careful, like it might tear if he breathed wrong. It was Danny's writing, smaller than the rest, like he'd written it in a hurry or maybe just didn't have much strength left in his hand by then. "Bear, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back to tell you myself. I want you to know something, and I need you to really hear it, not just read it and move on. I used to think being your brother meant keeping you safe from anything that could hurt you. That's why I left. I thought if I disappeared, the trouble chasing me wouldn't follow you too. I was wrong. All I did was leave you standing alone in it anyway, without even knowing why." Real brotherhood isn't about keeping each other away from danger. Any man can do that. Real brotherhood is standing in it together, shoulder to shoulder, even when it's ugly, even when it costs you something. That's the part I got wrong. I hope you don't make the same mistake I did. Don't run from this, Bear. Whatever this is, whenever you read it, stand in it. That's what family does. Marcus read the words twice, then a third time, slower, letting them settle into him the way water settles into cracked ground. He thought about Sarah's face in the garage that night, steady and scared at the same time. He thought about the duffel bag sitting by the stairs. He thought about Tommy's drawing on the wall, 3 stick figures standing together in front of a garage that wasn't even finished yet. Danny had run once, had spent years alone doing it, thinking it was the noble thing, thinking silence was some kind of gift, and it had cost him everything he could have had with the people who loved him. Marcus wasn't going to make that mistake. Not with Sarah. Not with Tommy. Not with the shop that carried both their names on the sign. He folded the letter careful and set it back in the tin box, but he didn't close the lid yet. He sat there a long moment, letting the resolve settle into his bones like something solid. Vic wanted a fight, wanted people whispering and doubting, wanted Marcus to either run or throw a punch, because either one would prove him right in the eyes of the town. Marcus wasn't going to give him either one. He reached for the folder of papers Danny had spent years gathering. The real proof, sitting in a drawer of the desk where he'd kept it safe since the day he found it. He pulled it out and set it beside the tin box, and for the first time since Sarah told him she was leaving, his hands were steady. Marcus made the calls the next morning. He didn't shout about it, didn't post angry words online or spread rumors of his own to fight fire with fire. He picked up the phone, one call at a time, and asked people to come to the community center on Saturday. Simple as that. Got something to show everybody, he told each person. About the frame job, about Danny. Figured it's time the truth got said out loud, in front of everybody, instead of whispered behind hands. Some people hesitated. A few asked questions he didn't answer, not yet. He wanted them to hear it all together, not in pieces that could get twisted around by the time they reached the next person's ears. He called the club members first, then the neighbors who'd known Danny, who'd watched Marcus around town for years with narrowed eyes and closed doors. He called the diner owner who used to slide his coffee across the counter without looking at him. He called Vic last. "You've got some nerve," Vic said when he picked up, already sneering through the phone. "Calling a meeting like you're somebody people listen to." "Be there Saturday," Marcus said. "Bring whatever you want to say. I'll bring what I've got." He hung up before Vic could answer. Saturday came gray and cool, the kind of fall day that made a man pull his jacket tight. The community center sat at the edge of town, a squat brick building with a gravel lot that filled up slow through the morning. Marcus watched from his truck as people arrived. Club members in leather, neighbors in flannel and work boots, a few faces he didn't recognize at all. Sarah came with Tommy, sitting near the back, her hands folded tight in her lap. She hadn't left yet. Not officially. But the duffel bag was still packed, sitting by the stairs, waiting to see which way this day would go. Inside, folding chairs lined up in uneven rows, and Marcus stood at the front with the tin box and Danny's folder resting on a table beside him. His hands didn't shake. He'd made his peace with that already, sitting in the dark 2 nights before, reading Danny's last words over and over until they became something solid inside his chest. Vic showed up 10 minutes late, swaggering in with 2 of his own men flanking him like bodyguards. He took a seat near the front, arms crossed, a smirk already set on his face like he'd already won whatever this was. Marcus waited until the room settled. Then he started talking. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The room was quiet enough that his words carried on their own weight. 8 years ago, I got blamed for something I didn't do, he said. Most of you know the story. Some version of it, anyway. I lost friends over it. Lost respect I'd spent years earning. And for a long time I didn't have a way to prove different. He opened the folder. Danny Reyes did. My old army brother. Before he passed, he spent years gathering proof of what really happened. He didn't do it for glory. He did it because he was my brother, and he believed the truth mattered, even when it cost him everything to chase it down alone. He pulled out photographs first. Grainy shots of a storage unit, dates stamped in the corner. Then copies of receipts, a name signed clear at the bottom that made a ripple move through the crowd, like wind through tall grass. Vic's name. This is the unit where the evidence got planted, Marcus said, holding the photo up so the whole room could see it. Danny tracked down the man who rented it. Got him to talk, got him to sign a statement before he passed himself 3 years back. Copies right here, notarized, dated. He passed the papers down the row, let people read them with their own eyes instead of just taking his word. Vic shot up out of his chair. This doesn't prove anything. Papers can be faked. Then explain the storage unit records, Marcus said, calm as still water. Explain your name on the rental agreement. Same month the evidence turned up. Explain why you're the only one in this room sweating. The room's eyes turned toward Vic, and for the first time, his smirk cracked at the edges. He looked around for support, for someone to back him up the way people always had before. Nobody moved to help him. Instead, murmurs rolled through the crowd, low and certain, the sound of minds changing all at once. An old club member Marcus hadn't spoken to in years stood up slow, looked straight at Vic, then turned to Marcus and gave a single, solemn nod. Sarah folded the last shirt and set it into the duffel bag. Her hands moved slow, like they didn't fully agree with what she was doing. The room above the garage looked smaller now, all packed up. Empty drawers hung open. The bed was stripped down to its bare mattress. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Linda, one of the women from the diner she'd gotten friendly with these past weeks. You hear? Marcus cleared his name today. Whole town saw it. Vic's finished around here. Sarah read it twice, then a third time. Her thumb hovered over the screen, but she didn't type anything back. She just sat there on the edge of the stripped mattress, staring at the words until they blurred a little. She heard a small sound from the next room, a soft clink of metal against wood. She got up and looked through the open doorway. Tommy stood by his bed, holding the little ratchet set Marcus had given him 2 weeks back, the one with his own name scratched into the handle in careful letters. Tommy turned it over once in his hands, like he was saying goodbye to it, then set it down gentle on the shelf. He didn't slam it, didn't complain. He just placed it there like something precious he was leaving behind and turned away without looking at it again. Sarah's chest tightened. She'd seen Tommy cry before, back when Danny first passed. Loud, messy tears that shook his whole body. This was different. This was quiet. And somehow it hurt worse to watch. You don't have to put that away, she said softly. Tommy looked up, surprised she was standing there. We're leaving though, right? Sarah opened her mouth, but nothing came out right away. She thought about all the reasons she'd told herself this past week. Safer somewhere new. Away from bikers and rivalries and danger that seemed to follow trouble wherever it went. She'd told herself it was the responsible thing, the mother thing, to pack up and go before anything else could touch her son. But looking at him now, at the careful way he'd set down that ratchet like it still mattered to him, she wasn't so sure anymore. Stay here a minute, she told him. I need to go see somebody. She grabbed her jacket and walked down the stairs, out across the gravel lot toward the garage. The big door was half open, yellow light spilling out into the dusk. She could hear the clink of tools, the low hum of a radio playing something old and slow. Marcus was alone, bent over a motorcycle propped up on its stand, working a wrench along some bolt with the kind of focus that made him look like he'd forgotten the rest of the world existed. He hadn't changed out of the shirt he must have worn to the community center. His sleeves were rolled up, his forearms streaked with grease. "Heard about today," Sarah said from the doorway. Marcus looked up, wiped his hands on a rag hanging from his belt. "Yeah, it's done. Vic won't be causing trouble around here anymore. Not after that." "That's good," Sarah said. She stepped inside, arms crossed over her chest, more to hold herself steady than anything else. "Tommy put away his tools tonight, like he was saying goodbye to them." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. "I keep telling myself I'm doing the right thing," Sarah went on. "Getting him somewhere safe, somewhere none of this can reach him." "Maybe you are," Marcus said quietly. "I wouldn't blame you either way." "But safe isn't just about danger, is it?" Sarah said. "Danny used to say that. Said the world's never fully safe, not really. What matters is who stands with you when it isn't." Marcus set the wrench down on the workbench. "I let this town see the truth today because I didn't want to hide anymore, didn't want to run. If you and Tommy leave now, some part of me will always wonder if I did that for nothing." Sarah studied him a long moment, the tired lines on his face, the steady way he stood even after everything. "He put your name on that tool," she said. "Doesn't seem like something a kid does for somebody he's about to forget." Marcus didn't answer, just held her gaze, waiting. Sarah let out a slow breath. "Guess I'll go unpack then." She turned and walked back toward the stairs, feeling lighter with every step. The sun hung low and gold over the garage that afternoon, the kind of light that made even old rust look warm. The new sign hung above the big door, the paint still smelling fresh when the wind blew right. Reyes and Cole Auto, painted in bold red letters, with a small black outline of a bear paw stamped in the corner. Marcus had drawn that paw print himself, though he never told anyone why. Some things a man just kept. Inside, the garage buzzed with the sound of real business. 2 cars sat up on lifts. A radio played classic rock low in the background, mixing with the clank of tools and the hiss of an air compressor. It didn't sound like much to a stranger passing by, but to Marcus it sounded like something he'd built with his own 2 hands, out of grief and stubbornness and a little bit of faith he didn't know he still had in him. Sarah sat behind the front desk, a stack of invoices in front of her, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She'd taken to the bookkeeping like she'd been doing it her whole life. The numbers made sense to her in a way that gave her peace, order in the middle of everything that had been chaos not too long ago. She glanced up every so often, watching the garage floor through the window of her little office, watching Marcus and the customers, and, most of all, watching Tommy. Tommy was by the back wall, sweeping up metal shavings with a broom too big for him, sleeves rolled up like he'd seen Marcus do 100 times. His school backpack sat by the door, tossed there the second he'd walked in, more excited to get to work than to go find friends or watch television like other 10-year-olds his age. He hummed while he swept, some tune Marcus didn't recognize, maybe one Danny used to hum too. "Careful with that pile," Marcus called over from the lift he was working under. "Don't want metal shavings in your shoes again." I know, Tommy said, grinning as he swept a little more carefully. Sarah smiled from behind the desk, shaking her head. 3 months ago, she never would have believed this was where they'd end up. A real business, a real home, a real family, patched together out of loss but somehow standing stronger for it. As the afternoon wound down, the last customer picked up his car and drove off, tires crunching over the gravel lot. Tommy finished sweeping and grabbed his backpack, already talking about a math test he had tomorrow. complaining about fractions the way only a kid could complain about something that didn't really matter in the big picture. "Go on inside. Get started on your homework," Sarah told him, ruffling his hair as he passed. "I'll bring dinner up in a bit." Tommy nodded and jogged off toward the stairs leading up to the apartment above the garage, the same one Sarah had once packed up to leave. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward the little office in the back corner of the garage, the one with the window that looked out over the whole shop floor. Sarah had fixed it up nice, a small lamp on the desk, a calendar on the wall, little things that made it feel less like a workspace and more like a place that mattered. On the shelf above the desk sat a photo in a plain wooden frame. It was the three of them, taken a few weeks back at the community center, right after Marcus's name had been cleared for good. Sarah was laughing at something out of frame. Tommy stood between them, grinning wide, missing one front tooth he'd lost that same week. Marcus stood a little stiff, unused to smiling for cameras, but his hand rested easy on Tommy's shoulder, and anyone looking at that photo could see he belonged there. Marcus reached into the drawer of the desk and pulled out the old tin box, dented and rusted at the corners, the one Tommy had carried across a parking lot all those months ago. He turned it over once in his hands, feeling the weight of it, the years of it. Then he set it gently on the shelf right beside the photograph. "Thank you, Danny," he said quietly, to no one but the empty office and the fading light outside, "for trusting me with them." Outside the window, the sun dipped low over the garage roof, painting the whole lot in soft orange and gold, warm and steady, like a promise finally kept. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.